Jason Schaefer walked the quiet streets of Longmont as he had every morning, the familiar weight of the mailbag a comforting burden. The sun had just begun to pierce the thin veil of autumn mist, casting long shadows across neatly trimmed lawns. Children's bicycles lay abandoned on driveways, a dog barked somewhere in the distance, and a soft wind rustled through the leaves. It was ordinary, peaceful, almost serene, but beneath the calm, tension simmered, unseen yet palpable. He adjusted his cap and checked his route, unaware that today would not be like any other. His mind wandered briefly to his son, the little boy he loved more than life itself, and the court papers he had filed just 2 days ago. He had asked for more custody, a change he believed was in the best interest of the child. It seemed simple, logical, fair. Yet fairness is often a fragile illusion, especially when it collides with jealousy and obsession. Across town, Devon Shriner stared at her phone. Her jaw tightened as she scrolled through images and messages that made her blood boil. Jason was living with her younger sister, Rosa, now. Her mind twisted every detail, every smile, every post into proof of betrayal. The world she once understood was suddenly unrecognizable, and in her eyes, the injustice was unforgivable. Jason paused at a mailbox, sliding letters into its compartment. A soft creak from a nearby bush made him glance over his shoulder. For a fleeting second, he felt a prickling unease, as if someone were watching. But the street was empty, just him and the rhythm of routine. He shrugged off the feeling and continued down the path, unaware that the quiet neighborhood had already become the stage for a crime that would shatter lives. Minutes later, the faint hum of a vehicle engine grew louder in the distance. Devon's postal truck had been parked for 40 minutes earlier that day, a seemingly mundane detail now loaded with sinister significance. GPS logs would later reveal that this time was precisely enough to leave her work route, commit an unthinkable act, and return without a trace. The calculations were cold, methodical, almost clinical. Jason reached the corner where a small street bent sharply. Doorbell cameras would later show a masked figure emerge from the shadows, moving with terrifying purpose. The world held its breath for an instant, the only sound the faint crunch of gravel beneath hurried steps. He did not see the figure, did not hear the first shot. A single gunshot erupted, then another, then 2 more in rapid succession. Each sound tore through the morning like a scream of pure violence, shattering the calm of the neighborhood. Neighbors later described a figure running, a car speeding away with one front hubcap missing. It was almost cinematic in its horror, a scene captured in fleeting fragments of memory. Jason fell to the ground, point blank to the forehead, a life ended before it had truly been lived. The ordinary had been obliterated, replaced by fear, grief, and confusion. When police arrived, they were met with chaos and disbelief. Witnesses were shaking, pointing in directions that barely made sense. But the evidence began to coalesce with chilling clarity. This was not a random act. It was personal. Every step, every shot, every escape route pointed to someone who knew Jason, someone who had the motive, the opportunity, and the willingness to kill. Investigators pieced together the fragments: Devon's anger at losing control, her resentment toward Rosa, the custody filings, the GPS data. The narrative was horrifying in its simplicity and terrifying in its intimacy. Here was a woman whose life had been consumed by jealousy and perceived betrayal, whose emotions had twisted into lethal action. Jason's family struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the injustice. How could a man devoted to his son, trusted by neighbors, loved by friends, be erased in the space of moments? The street where he had delivered mail for years became a crime scene, a snapshot of vulnerability in a world that promised safety but delivered horror. The first chapter of this story closed with detectives staring at a screen showing Devon's route, the timestamps blinking in stark relief. A young son waiting for his father, a sister caught in the crossfire of hatred, and a killer who believed she was justified. Everything was about to unravel, the truth hidden behind layers of anger, secrecy, and a digital footprint that could not be erased. And then, a single discovery flashed across the screen, small but undeniable. A Snapchat notification, seemingly innocent, held a fragment of truth that would soon ignite the investigation, revealing secrets no one could have anticipated. The screen glowed with a name and a time stamp, a silent herald of the storm about to descend. The quiet street of Longmont would never feel ordinary again. The story was only beginning. The Snapchat notification lingered like a spark over dry tinder. Investigators leaned closer, squinting at the timestamp and the message's content. It was brief, almost casual, but in its simplicity lay a damning truth. Jason's death had been calculated, deliberate, and the trail of digital breadcrumbs was beginning to emerge. Every detail began to twist the narrative, revealing a dark choreography of jealousy, obsession, and rage. Detectives retraced Devon Shriner's steps. Her postal truck had been idle for 40 minutes that morning, an anomaly that the GPS logs could not explain. Interviews with co-workers painted a picture of a woman distracted, agitated, consumed by thoughts of Jason and the life he had begun to reclaim with Rosa. No one could imagine she would act on her resentment, yet the evidence began to speak louder than anyone's disbelief. In Jason's quiet neighborhood, the scene replayed in forensic detail. The gunshots, 4 in rapid succession, each deliberate. The doorbell camera captured a masked figure fleeing, feet pounding the pavement, then the abrupt, jarring sight of a car speeding away with a missing hubcap. Every frame, every witness testimony, every piece of digital evidence pointed to someone who knew exactly where Jason would be, when he would be there, and how to strike without hesitation. Inside Devon's apartment, police noticed subtle signs, misplaced items, hurried cleaning, and a tension that vibrated through the air. When confronted, she flared with anger, demanding to see her son, yet offered no explanation that could justify the glaring GPS anomaly. The facade of normalcy she tried to maintain crumbled with every question, revealing fissures of fear and guilt. The motive became clearer with each layer of investigation. Jason had filed for increased custody just days earlier, a decision that threatened to strip Devon of the control she had fought to maintain over her son's life. Her resentment toward Rosa, now living with Jason, festered into a dangerous obsession. The tangled web of family, love, and betrayal had begun to spin toward a catastrophic collision. Detectives examined Jason's routine, mapping every step, every mail drop, every moment he spent on his familiar path. The precision with which the killer had struck was terrifying. The shooter knew him, knew his habits, and waited for the exact moment when the streets would be empty, the morning calm shattered by the eruption of violence. It was a plan executed with cold efficiency, a personal vendetta that ended in tragedy. Every new piece of evidence deepened the horror. Devon's Snapchat activity revealed interactions that hinted at coordination, perhaps even a premeditated obsession. Her digital footprint intertwined with Jason's last moments, exposing secrets she could not erase. Investigators began to reconstruct the timeline with chilling accuracy. The truck parked, the drive to Longmont, the execution, and the return, all within the window captured by GPS and corroborated by witnesses. Friends and family of Jason struggled with disbelief. How could someone they had known, someone who had once loved, become capable of such calculated violence? The grief was layered with confusion, each revelation cutting deeper. His young son would never understand the reasons behind the actions that stole his father, the cruel intersection of custody, jealousy, and rage that had rewritten the story of his life. As the investigation unfolded, more contradictions emerged. Devon's statements clashed with evidence, her anger and defensiveness a mask for something far darker. The detectives felt the tension rising, the danger of underestimating her temperament or her determination. Every lead, every data point, every recorded observation seemed to confirm what they had feared. The killer was close, intimate, someone driven by a deeply personal vendetta. Then came the turning point. Analysts cross-referenced social media, GPS, and surveillance footage. A pattern emerged, one that left no room for doubt. The route, the timing, the vehicle, the masked figure, all pointed back to Devon. Her motive, her opportunity, her digital footprint, and her proximity to the events of that morning created a web of evidence impossible to ignore. It was a revelation both shocking and inevitable. The detectives now faced a moral and emotional crucible. The young son, the family, the grieving neighbors, all relied on them to uncover the truth. Every moment of hesitation could allow the shadow of injustice to persist. They prepared for the confrontation, for the unraveling of secrets that had remained hidden behind anger, obsession, and betrayal. In a quiet office, a single photograph of Jason lay on the table, a reminder of what had been lost. It was ordinary yet haunting, capturing a man whose life was stolen in an instant. The detectives traced every step, every digital signal, every lie, piecing together a narrative that was as heartbreaking as it was horrifying. The truth, once obscured by rage and jealousy, was beginning to crystallize. And then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Longmont, a new revelation emerged. The Snapchat message, revisited with fresh perspective, revealed a hidden connection, a final clue that would not only confirm the investigators' suspicions, but also set the stage for the reckoning to come. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was within reach, waiting to strike with the precision that mirrored the crime itself. The story had turned, the crime had escalated, and the moment of truth, the confrontation that would reveal the depths of human obsession and the power of evidence, was now inevitable. The room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet tapping of fingers on keyboards. Investigators reviewed the final pieces of the puzzle, each fragment of evidence pointing unmistakably toward Devon Shriner. Her digital footprint, the GPS logs, the Snapchat exchanges, the vehicle tied to the escape, all of it formed a damning portrait. There was no longer doubt, only the question of how to confront her without giving her a chance to unravel further. When Devon arrived at the station, she radiated controlled fury. Her eyes darted, lips pressed tight, every gesture a mixture of defiance and panic. She demanded to see her son, her voice sharp and commanding, yet beneath the surface, a subtle tremor betrayed the fear she had tried so desperately to mask. Investigators let her anger speak, recording every word, every reaction. They had the upper hand, armed with facts she could not refute. They laid out the timeline, step by step, GPS points, witness accounts, and the Snapchat message that had first illuminated her plan. The evidence was meticulous, unassailable. Devon's expressions flickered, a shadow of realization crossing her face. Her story fractured under the weight of the proof, her anger no longer a shield, but a thin veil over the terror of exposure. The detectives watched as the narrative collapsed around her. The motive was unmistakable: jealousy, resentment, a desperate attempt to punish a man reclaiming his life and his son. The crime was intimate, cold, blooded, executed with precision, yet her unraveling revealed a human fragility beneath the monstrous act. Every lie she had clung to, every justification she had whispered to herself, crumbled as the truth pressed in from every direction. Investigators pressed forward carefully, ensuring that every confession, every acknowledgement was documented. Devon's defiance turned to murmured admissions, fragments of the plan spilling from her lips. The masked figure, the timing, the choice of street, the calculated shots, all emerged in chilling clarity. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as the gravity of her actions filled the space. Outside, Longmont continued its quiet rhythm, unaware of the storm that had passed behind closed doors. But inside, justice was taking shape, slow and deliberate. Each detail of Jason's life, each memory of his son waiting at home, fueled the resolve of those tasked with ensuring the truth prevailed. Karma, once delayed, was now inevitable. As the confession concluded, investigators felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the truth had been revealed, sorrow for the irreparable loss Jason's family would endure. They knew that nothing could restore the life stolen in the streets of Longmont. Nothing could erase the terror of that morning. Yet the revelation brought a measure of closure, a sense that justice, though delayed, had not failed entirely. The final act of evidence revealed the cold irony of her downfall. The snapshot that had first hinted at her plan, the small digital whisper that might have seemed insignificant, had ultimately become the chain that bound her. Technology, so casual and pervasive, had captured what human deception sought to conceal. The very medium she had relied upon to coordinate or obscure her intentions had become the instrument of her exposure. Jason's son would never know the world his father had walked through, never understand fully the courage and kindness he had embodied. But the revelation of the truth ensured that the darkness that had taken him would not go unchallenged. Devon would face the consequences, the system finally delivering the reckoning that had seemed so impossible on that fateful morning. In the quiet aftermath, detectives stepped out into the crisp evening air, the sky painted in shades of orange and violet. Longmont's streets were still, almost serene, yet beneath that calm lay the echoes of what had transpired. Lives had been shattered, a family torn apart, but the truth had been illuminated, a piercing light through the shadows of obsession and rage. The case file closed with a sense of finality, but the story lingered. It lingered in the empty mailbox on the corner street, in the photographs of Jason smiling with his son, in the digital timestamps that had betrayed a plan. It lingered as a reminder that obsession can fester silently, that betrayal can erupt with devastating consequences, and that even the smallest trace of truth can ultimately prevail. And in that quiet, cinematic moment, the story of Jason Schaefer, the beloved mailman whose life was stolen by jealousy and rage, reached its conclusion. Justice, slow and deliberate, had arrived, leaving behind the haunting reminder that actions driven by obsession can never escape the truth forever. The streets of Longmont would eventually return to their rhythm, yet the memory of that morning, the shots that shattered innocence, and the revelation that followed would remain indelible. A life taken, a secret exposed, and a community forced to confront the darkness that sometimes hides behind familiar faces. In the end, the final image remained etched in memory: a quiet street at dawn, an abandoned mailbox, and the knowledge that the truth, no matter how long buried, will always find its way to the light.